I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the President of Ghana. Deputy Secretary General, Excellencies, the last time I was in this hallowed hall, I came in my capacity as the then Foreign Minister of Ghana. 16 years later, I'm happy to be here once again, addressing this august gathering, this time as President of the Republic, having overseen my country's successful bid for a non-permanent seat on the Council. I want to assure all member states that Ghana, as we have often stated, will work to address our collective interests as spelled out in the United Nations Charter. And that is why Ghana is chosen as the theme for this high-level debate in the Council, counter-terrorism in Africa, an imperative for peace, security, and development. Excellencies, terrorism has always posed a danger to international peace and security, and continues to threaten peaceful coexistence between and within nations. But in our present circumstances, its form and manifestation, especially on the African continent, have claimed the lives of thousands and thousands of innocent people, rendered millions homeless, and handicapped many economies in their pursuit of growth and sustainable developments. The Sahel, for example, with a population of some 300 million people, has accounted for the highest incidence of recorded terrorist attacks between January and June this year, which has resulted in some 5,412 deaths across the region. Indeed, the African Center for the Study and Research on Terrorism tells us that out of the 699 attacks that have occurred this year, the Sahel accounted for 179 of such attacks, with 1,909 fatalities. Whilst we can admit that the political context of the Security Council's involvement is complex and the operating environment dangerous, our collective inaction, even as we contemplate whether and how to intervene, risks the further spread of instability across the continent of Africa. Already, some Sahelian and West African countries have been overrun by terrorists and other armed groups, who now feel motivated and emboldened to expand their reach of influence to the coastal countries of West Africa in a grand attempt to get access to the high seas and create a vicious linkage between terrorism and piracy. The international community, particularly the Council, which has primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, cannot therefore choose to be neutral in the design and implementation of specific responses required to confront the threat of international terrorism. We acknowledge that the fight against terrorism can be a protracted one that could take several years. But with collective efforts, terrorism and those behind its evil acts can and will eventually be defeated. Excellencies, in reiterating Ghana's strong rejection and condemnation of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, it is important to underscore that arresting the deteriorating security situation in the Sahel and West Africa would require urgent actions predicated on concerted efforts if we are to succeed in our attempts to bring progress, prosperity, and development to the peoples in the region. In this regard, I would like to share 3 key points for consideration by this Council. Firstly, in addressing the threats relating to terrorism in Africa, it is important that we leverage the role of the African Union and its regional economic communities in raising a robust and resourced force to confront the terrorists and other armed groups, alongside other peace operation initiatives. Ghana welcomes the ongoing joint strategic assessment of the security, governance, and development issues of the Sahel, just as we encourage the high-level panel led by the respected former president of the Republic of Niger, His Excellency Mahamadou Issoufou, to leverage the best elements of the G5 Sahel Joint Force, the Accra Initiative, the Nouakchott Process, and the Multinational Joint Task Force, and consider recommendations for a unified and restructured regional force. We urge the Council to be supportive of such efforts. Secondly, the burden of confronting terrorism cannot be borne by those in the region alone. It requires strong collaboration between the United Nations, the African Union, and the regional economic communities, especially ECOWAS, to address the question of adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing for regional-led operations. The African Union has demonstrated its commitment and capacity to manage effectively such financing and to comply with the required human rights standards in such operations. This Council and the wider international community must play their part if there's a desire to have a continuing relevance. Thirdly, the structure and approach of international support to countering terrorism, including in the Sahel, has to be preemptive rather than reactive. There is the need, therefore, for the Council and the wider international community to address the underlying drivers of the instability through the building of resilience in conflict-prone regions, including the areas of promoting democratic values, development, and state services. International support must be placed fully behind deliberate interventions to promote inclusive governance and the extension of effective state authority in several parts of our territories in order to meet the expectations of our largely youthful populations, who in some instances have unfortunately fallen victim to the radicalized messages of extremists. Excellencies, the Council's support for adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing of African-led operations would be an important starting point if it is continued to assume its responsibility as the primary actor for the maintenance of international peace and security. And in concluding, I would strongly urge members of the Council to revisit the vexed issue of the reform of the United Nations system, especially of the Security Council, and to do so on the basis of the African Common Position on UN reform, as enunciated in the Eswatini Consensus. If indeed the authority of this Council, which in recent times appears to have been devalued because of its anachronistic structure, is to be restored. I thank you for your attention.